being to everyone here, we're gonna officially open this meeting this morning. In that annual budget, I found that there's a terminology used saying for other personal services. And out of those personal services, I don't understand what that means, personal services. But almost $45 million was spent on personal services, but nothing have been spent on the undeveloped low-income communities, which is the South Side and all these other communities. And what we want to do today is have a little open discussion. Some of the things that we may discuss might not be very desirable to talk about. It's going to pertain to black and white. It's not necessarily about racism for us to sit here at this table, but it's the variation of truth. It's a foundation that led us to where we are here as a result of reality that got us here. And exclusion has been a pattern in practice here in this city for years and years and years. And everyone here is aware of that. Through districting and zoning, a lot of activities have occurred that led to this type of a budget that would state, let me make sure I'm correct, personal services. That's all that it said, 1,000 personal services. And when it totaled out to $44 million and some odd dollars, but it don't give no explanation of what the funds were spent on, or how it was spent, or this kind of thing. But we do know none of the funds were allocated toward economic prosperity as far as the community itself being self-sustainable. And what we want to do is talk about the 30-year projection plan, where the community fits into these plans, how we are going to lay out, how we're going to get to where we're going to arrive, so that we don't get involved in litigation and this thing we've been threatening. We do know we have grounds to actually file litigation. There's not a question in that. We do know that black communities have been excluded. We do know that we have had integration, but we got integrated segregation among the integration, where a particular group is screened out of a group and targeted for non-progression. Like I said, it's going to be some undesirable topics that we be able to discuss, but we got to be able to discuss them without having any white fragility or black fragility, so that one feel offended by the remarks that we may be making and discussing. We got to be able to talk about it openly, so we can come to the conclusion of how we're going to arrive to a resolution. And then Ms. Redwine is going to lay out how we got there, and to this degree that we are here.
All right, I'd like to talk about the injustice of, or what I perceive to be an injustice that's been going on in Valdosta for the last 43 years. I don't see how we can plan any kind of corridors in Griffin, along that corridor. I don't see how we can do any of that until we get this issue resolved, the local historic district, which has segregated our community for 43 years. This is the map. I've been told the map that I have is not explicit enough. But I don't have to tell you, Mary, you know what the local historic district is, and I know you know, you're an attorney. And I know you know, all right? And you know the boundary line has segregated the south side of Valdosta for over 43 years. And you do know, you should know, and I'm not gonna go into a lot of detail, but this line right here that has excluded the South Side Historic District, it didn't exclude it right away. It excluded it in 2007 when it was created. But it excluded the black part of downtown Valdosta when this district was created, the Valdosta Commercial District. It excluded it really when the ordinance was adopted to create this local historic district. Had you been the city attorney at that meeting when they voted to adopt this, would you have approved that?
Would I approve
A
that?
vote of the city council vote to exclude black Valdosta You know, I thought city attorneys object to votes that are illegal. The reason why that is illegal is because it created the Historical Preservation Commission. The Historic Preservation Commission cannot service this area at all because of the ordinance. So this area has been excluded for 43 years from service by the Historic Preservation Commission, which is under the umbrella of the Department of Historical Preservation, which is under Planning and Zoning. But they excluded this. And I have sub-area maps and all this. I'm kind of jumping ahead because I want y'all to see the injustice. But this is the injustice, this is the line. And policies have been in place since this line was drawn to keep African American property from being preserved for 43 years. I have two packets in here. One is very brief. The second one is very detailed. There are districts that have been created where only one person has homes. It is a tiny district. It is called the Fairview District. It is in Lavender. And it has been managed 43 years. There's only 6 homes in this district. And it's been managed 43 years by the HPC. The HPC and the Valdosta Historic Foundation, which were created by this local historic ordinance, which is illegal, I believe they are worse than the Ku Klux Klan. The policies that they have enforced for the last 43 years have kept black people oppressed for 43 years, oppressed in many ways. This is after the James Beck overpass was constructed, which started around 1980. This is when the local historic district was adopted, 1980. This is when the Historical Preservation Commission was created, 1980. The Valdosta Heritage Foundation was created, 1980. The Central Valdosta Development Authority, all of these entities that were created to support everything within the local historic district were created around that same time. The Beck overpass was the beginning of the destabilization of the black side of town. But it was all of this was all planned. And it has remained that way for 43 years. Now, do you think it's normal for a town to look like this in one part and another way in another part? And this is the way it looks in broad daylight in the middle of the week. It's a ghost town. This was caused by that Beck overpass. Then it was exacerbated by the passing of this ordinance, which further depressed this area because it has received nothing. The black downtown area of Valdosta should have been included in the very first district that was placed in the local historic district, which was a Valdosta commercial district. It had to be first. It had to take care of downtown first. It had to create that district. I'm all for historic preservation in districts, but there aren't any black districts. There's a Southside Historic District, but it has absolutely no value, basically, because it's outside of the local historic district. But you've got Brookwood District, you've got East Side District, you've got North Patterson Street District. And the North Patterson Street District only has 14 homes in it. So the HPC and the VHF have been managing a small number of homes for 43 years. At least they preserve them to restore, which they got restoration dollars, refab dollars, all kinds of dollars are available when you're inside the local historic district. When you're outside of it, nothing is available. Absolutely nothing. Absolutely nothing. Now, had you been city attorney, would you have allowed the city council to adopt an ordinance that leaves out an entire community? And then when you look at the east, I mean, would you have advised that?
If it's based upon race, certainly not.
Right. But, and this was based upon, what do you think this was based upon? And then this right here was left out. This is the black side of this district. It's a huge district, east side, east end. But the only part that's inside the local historic district are the white neighborhoods. So there were 2 instances of exclusion, one here, actually 3, because the black commercial district should have been included in this district. Instead, it was dumped, and I'm saying dumped, it was dumped into the Southside Historic District because no thought was given to the district. Consequently, the heritage of the Black Commercial District, which at one time had over 200 businesses, just on Ashley Street. I have a list of all the business. I got these from Georgia Tech. It's in the packet, but you can't read the names. The other thing I wanted to point out is that the public relations photos that are on the city's website are misleading. This is a photo that shows Southside on the website. That was nothing like our Southside. So it's deceiving, even with PR, it's deceiving on the website. And then St. Paul AME Church. St. Paul AME Church is the oldest church, black or white, in downtown Valdosta, in its original location since 1866. It is not on the National Register of Historic Places. It is not within the local historic district, and it is not within the Valdosta Commercial District where it really should have been. All of these years, and it's suffering. The congregants have had to each Sunday watch their community crumble as they went to church decades, not understanding why are we being neglected. It's because of the ordinance. The ordinance says, and it's clear, and I've got the ordinance in here for those of you who want to read it, but it specifically says that the Historic Preservation Commission can only serve those within the local historic district. The Valdosta Commercial District is only serviced by Main Street, only serviced by Central Development Authority, only serviced by the entities that you see on your website are only serviceable to people within the local historic district. It's a fact. It's a fact. The sub-area map. Well, before I get to the sub-area map, well, I'm kind of jumping around. I'm getting kind of excited. I'm getting diverted. But I really want to go back to this district right here, the Fairview district, before we move on. There is a member of the Historic Preservation Commission who owns most of the houses in this district. There are only about 6. Do you think that's right, City Attorney?
I didn't appoint the person.
This was way, all this happened before you.
Yeah.
But the people who created this ordinance, they were the founders of Valdosta Heritage Foundation. Some of those people still live today. I have a letter written from Attorney Michael Dover. It's in their second packet. I think it's the last page. And this shows you the mindset of these people who did this. He still serves on the board of the VHF. Dr. Harry Ham, who owns all of these houses over here in Fairview, is an ardent member of the HBC. He was the one who told us, who asked us, my group, why are you even here? He asked us that in a meeting. That was in May of 2021. I found the document we submitted. So we're not, and we were really uninvited, which is illegal, and we don't have a voice. Because he knows they don't represent us. He knew that. And after James Horton left, he felt comfortable enough to humiliate us in that meeting, in a public forum. And no one to this day has apologized to us about that, my group. No one. Can you imagine how that made us feel?
No.
Okay. So, but this man should not be managing property he owns for 43 years. He's been on the HBC for 20 years. He was he served as president of the VHF for 2 terms. They stocked these committees and these commissions with people they know. They are passed down through descendants, because we're talking about 40 years. But it all started with one seed. The man who sat on the 1980 Ernest Nigem City Council, who voted for this district, is Harold Bennett. He's called the grandfather of a century of historic preservation. He was one of the founding members of the Valdosta Heritage Foundation, and he was the original member of the Historic Preservation Commission. They buy property, like you were suggesting, that someone buy up coal and renovate it. Well, the Valdosta Heritage Foundation has been doing that for decades. They've been buying up property, renovating it. I think there needs to be an audit. There needs to be an audit. We need to know what's going on. Why are they buying up all this property in the city and renovating it? Who are they selling it to, and who are the realtors? That's another issue, but it's still it's something wrong about that setup. They're working together too closely, and the reason why they are successful at it is because they have the support and I have a list on one of these pages of everybody in Valdosta supports these two entities, so they appear to be legal.
So let me give you, I'll tell you who I got my depth of, my shallow knowledge, you got much better depth of knowledge on this. Sonny Vickers gave me a pretty good history lesson on a lot of this too. On the designation, good news is it can be moved, it can be realigned, it can be expanded or shrunk. But on a local or a federal designation, if you'll watch, and I watched many of them downtown, I had my building downtown for 12 years, right there on Penny's Alley. I had the building that had the gym downstairs, my radio station upstairs. You can't change a thing.
You can't change what?
You have to follow the biggest, to be outside that zone is to have the freedom to prepare your house as you see fit, to dry your roof, to change a window. To be inside that district is to change only the window that historically, as it was first put up on that house, or an archway in an opening to a business as it was seen. But there's a lot more restriction to certain designations than others. Whichever way you guys want to go, I'm sure that we can get there.
I think that
But remember some of the undue burden you would be putting on people.
that's not an undue burden. Why is it, and I've heard that argument before, it's not true. It's really not
I'm
true.
for whatever
But the Crescent, you
want.
cannot expect a home on the south side of town to look like the Crescent. Okay,
Well,
you can't impose those architectural features on a home that's out of its context. That's the problem with the local historic district, it's antiquated.
Yeah, they want it in its.
I've read the review and design guidelines of what they want.
want it in context, not out of context.
All right, okay, well, let me ask you this then, do you think this is in context? Let's look at the sub-area map. And you can change it. Sonny Vickers really didn't know a lot about historic preservation. But this is a sub-area map, and he didn't know a lot about how people think in the community. He represented a small segment of the people in the community. Not everyone thought like him. We're from different backgrounds, we're not all the same.
I get it. And
Just
I'm
a real-
not one to steer it,
Before
I'm
you
gonna
get to that,
to help.
But let me just try to explain the sub-area map and explain to you why this needs to be changed. Do you see that little green little spot right there in this sub? First of all, the historic preservation can only represent 3 sub-areas. South side is out. So they can't even represent South Side based on their own ordinance. The ordinance is faulty. It's created a lot of problems. It's discriminated against a lot of people for decades. It's illegal. The sub-area map even says HPC cannot service outside these sub-areas. There's only 3. This one, shaded in green. This one shaded in purple. This one shaded in yellow. But this one over here is not even really a true sub-area because there's nothing in it except Fairview, which is a high-style architectural category. What's over here? Who's managing it? And, that shouldn't even be shaded. So I think that this line has caused everything that I outlined in some of the pictures. For instance, the Phyllis Wheatley Reading Club. Why was it torn down? What has the historic preservation done to salvage anything historic in the Black community since its creation in 1980? Absolutely nothing. There's not one Black church on the register. Macedonia is the oldest Black church in Valdosta. It's not on the register. Antioch is probably the most architecturally rich church we have. It's not on the register. It's not in the LHD. St. Timothy, not on the register, not in the LHD.
Right.
Poor St. Paul.
In the city.
It's in the city, not protected at all for 40-something years. And all of these Black businesses, these are the Black businesses that Georgia Tech did a survey on back in 1977. These were operating Black businesses that had payroll. So these were not mom and pop shops. These were bona fide businesses. I have them listed in here, but it's kind of hard to read. I'm sorry.
Just a Redwine, before you expand the argument beyond where the mayor was, I want to go back and readdress something that you stated about changing the window. From a businessman standpoint, I can understand that. Well, I don't want to You know, I gotta go through all these hoops to change a window because of historic
It's
preservation.
not true.
If we were in a regular facility, fine. But the whole point of historic preservation, of course, we all know, is to preserve the essence of what the town's history, what it originally looked like, monuments that should not be erased. To go back and place what Sister Redwine is saying, the totality of what we're here for, is several things happen. If she had not expressed the 200 businesses that were in town, including a black bank, no one in this, it's not written anywhere in history. No one would ever know it. And it takes one culture and says, look at this building, look at this building, look at that building. All of those buildings right there are historically preserved. At the same time, you take, what was the house again on Ashley? I always forget.
That's my family house,
No,
511.
that big white house where they do all the weddings and
Oh, the Crescent.
the Crescent. 2 blocks over, the Crescent's historically preserved. 2 blocks over, you have a church like St. Peter, which has the original belfry, a 700-pound bell that's hanging on by a beam that actually, I could actually condemn the church. If I took enough people over there, I could actually condemn the church. I pastored that church, and I've had the ceiling fall in. I'm afraid to let women use the bathroom because I'm afraid the belfry will fall on someone and kill them. And because it sits outside historic preservation, what makes it discrimination is the fact that this building and that building both fall in the scope of what the state says. If they were around during an integral part of history, that 75% of the dwelling is still intact, which is why you can't just change a window. You must maintain 75% of the dwelling to fall under historic preservation.
Correct.
And there must be something that occurred in these residences that had a direct tie to history. Well, with St. Peter, it is one of the oldest Methodist parishes in Tomtown. It was the site of a lot of civil rights activities. That alone qualifies it. There's more than 75% of the building in place. One is considered historically preserved, the other's not. They both qualify. And when we attempt to go get these buildings qualified, we're either given a bunch of bureaucratic red tape, we're either pushed to the side. And I can give you a prime example. Mitchell's Barbecue. I went to get Mitchell's Barbecue.
May I interject something, please? There is another incident of segregation involved in this historic line, and it involves a historical driving tour that's sponsored by the Lowndes County Convention Visitors Bureau and the Valdosta Heritage Foundation, and it has been going on this tour for 40-something years. The first partner with it was the Cancer Society, and it's supported by all of these entities in Valdosta, but this tour, out of 73 homes, not one of them is a Black heritage essence. And these are all of the homes that are featured in this packet that I prepared. I'm almost done. And if you look closely at it, which you can't really see, but it's online, you get a glimpse into the homes that make up the Brookwood district. You get a glimpse of the homes. These are all homes within the LHD that are sponsored by this tour. Not even Dasher High School that they did place on the register in 1985, which means little because it's not in the LHD, so it can be demolished. Even that's not on this. Do you think taxpayers should be paying for tours that are exclusively for people who are being directed only to within the LHD? And the ordinance permits this. The ordinance allows this. The ordinance is illegal. It violates the 1964 Civil Rights Act. I know y'all don't put too much stock in that, but that's very important. And the National Historic Preservation Act forbade it. It warned the original preservationists to not do what they did. It warned if you read the act, just read it. It warned the original preservationists not to favor their own ethnicity. And this is exactly what they did when they drafted that law. When the council raised their hands and approved it, they agreed to segregate Valdosta in a way that Jim Crow never could segregate this town. And it's been segregated ever since. And that bridge made it a hard segregation. Now you've got children who are having to reintegrate. Jenny Beck and I, Mayor Beck's daughter, we integrated in 1970, 71. She's the president of the 1970 Valdosta High School class. We were kids. I went through teachers calling me Negro instead of calling me Negro. I've gone through all of that before. I've gone through kids calling me nigger every day at school. I was freedom of choice. I didn't go with a group. I went when I was in junior high school. Valerie integrated in elementary. So we were the first to integrate the school system here. I've gone through integration before, but now I'm feeling like I'm having to go through it all again. Everybody's so disparate and there's a rift in the community. I feel it. The new white friends I've made through historical preservation, I'm feeling the rift now with them because a lot of them are associated with the VHF, the Valdosta Heritage Foundation, and the HPC. So I'm going through integration stuff again because of this ordinance and because of the hardscape of that bridge that's created the rift in the communities. You've got white kids and black kids don't even know each other anymore. We got over that. I thought we had overcome that, but we have not. We've gone back. Race relations in this town are just horrible. And it's all because of this, that line. All because of it. And can I just add one more issue?
Yes.
And then I'm done. One more issue. Okay. The religious community. West Hill Avenue, when the Hill Avenue overpass went up, the entire religious community in Valdosta was destroyed. Evidence. The Macedonia Baptist Association minutes, it was a convention. My great-great-grandfather was the treasurer. Reverend T.A. Lomax was the moderator. That's J.L. Lomax's father. This is how far back this publication goes. 1917. This was their 40th assembly. When that overpass, Macedonia is on West Side, aren't you? Everybody knows what Macedonia is. When the West Hill, I'm calling it West Hill, but it's the Hill Avenue overpass, when it was constructed, it went through the core of the religious community that came from the West Hill Avenue community, Macedonia. And there are so many churches, Reverend Neal, this should really be of interest to you and to you, Reverend Robinson, of the number of churches that's listed in this publication. 40 years ago, and this was published in 1917, and that entire community of religious history has been basically wiped out because of the Hill Street overpass. And the question why these overpasses always going in black neighborhoods, and why those two, the one in the Beck, destroyed the commercial community, and the Hill destroyed the intellectual and the religious community. And only one white company got benefited from being displaced, and that was somebody you mentioned in your interview. Got $2 million. A furniture company received $2 million for being displaced.
So every business on that corridor got paid. They got an original settlement. It was the furniture company that went back and sued for more against G.B.R. They sued G.B.R. and won about $1 million more, I believe, just shy of $1 million more. They thought it affected their business more than they were compensated. One attorney represented up both sides, got them a fair settlement, and that bunch came back and said that wasn't a fair settlement, so they asked for more.
Well, what do you think about?
I was about to be chosen on I was sitting in the jury pool. A guy named Dick Rocky was the foreman of the thing. He got picked. I did not get picked. I never get picked. But I sat there and listened. They actually, in just jury selection, they actually argued the case right in front of us. Judge corrected them about 5 times, but that bunch's claim was they wanted more than they were first originally compensated.
Well, I want you all to read. I know you're not going to read all of this, but if you read this religious publication, you will see they had accounting. This was 1917, and these people were intelligent people. They were well-read people. They were literate. They had charities. They were very active, and all of that's dissipated, more or less. Some of you may recognize some names in these churches. I don't know. And the last thing I want to say, Reverend Robinson, and then I'm gonna have the mayor talk all he wants to you and to us. Well, I wanted to. We thought this was important that the MLK statue. I'm not really sure how it was funded, but it is outside of the local historic district. But Martin Luther King was an integrationist. He believed in people, black and white, working together. And he is standing in one of the most integrated, one of the most segregated towns in the South. And that's Valdosta, Georgia.
That obelisk and that monument in that park is absolutely beautiful. We just gotta connect it. Okay. We gotta get there because it's also the most underutilized park in town.
It's not inviting.
It is gorgeous. We take great care of it. It is pristine, but it is just, we gotta connect everybody to it, so.
And also the street, because I heard you say something about Big Nick. I'm over there. I'm in the business over there. My family house is right there by the park, which was built in 1891.
That's still a nice looking stretch.
1897, yeah. So that whole area, we want to see that area come back. It was businesses on that street. And so, and I talked to Nick about maybe we could come and besides the 2 funeral homes that's on there, the business is back on that street.
He even looked there and he even looked at the Mitchell's. Big Nick went down to look at the Mitchell's property.
Right, that was torn down next to my,
He couldn't make it work. So.
Well, the monument itself needs to have the fountain, nothing else, the fountain turned back on. It's been off forever and a day. The whole point that makes the fountain, is, or the monument, is the fountain. Now, the reason that we came to you, and the argument may seem a little dissected, the crux of this argument is when the Historic Preservation Commission was put together, it may not have been done by you, but it's done by the mayor. And then the city council has to approve it. And then that council surveys the city. So while you weren't the mayor, we're making you culpable now by saying whoever originally started this, because I wasn't here, I've only been here about 20 years now, but whoever did this, when they started it, used the segregated eye to determine boundary lines, to determine which buildings would be involved, and they knew that based on both city funding, state and federal funding, that monies would have to go to these entities. Well, by creating a zigzag zone and excluding black entities, more money goes to non-black, I won't even say white, non-black entities, and eventually they're erased. So now, it's an opportunity to make Valdosta a viable city. This is not just about preservation, but it also extends into the longevity of the city, the lifeline of the city. Because, let me tell you, a college kid graduates from Valdosta State University, goes through an undergrad program, and his first endeavors are to leave, his first thought process, leave Valdosta and go wherever else. When I moved here, that same training year, I ran that train. I was an engineer at the time, worked with CSX. And I subsequently went to management. Sitting around the table doing the same thing, jaw-jacking about how we would run the train lines. And our headway was always Valdosta. We tried to run Amtrak east and west from Folkestone all the way to Tallahassee, and Valdosta always stood in the way. We tried to run a line from Athens to Atlanta to Macon to Valdosta, and Valdosta always stood in the way. It was always Valdosta, and never could understand why.
Weren't we supposed to be Disney World as well?
What's that?
So, didn't Disney first look here?
It looked here, and it's always been Valdosta.
I think that's like.
And the concept is, we don't want a corporate structure tearing down, but it's inevitable. And by helping this, now, when I moved here and I started looking at the cost of living, initially I thought, oh, well, I'm living in Gwinnett. Surely the cost of living in little Valdosta has to be less than Gwinnett. And then I go pull the cost of living and you're only 7% behind Atlanta currently. And I thought, what makes this area a tourist area? There's nothing for me to see other than Okefenokee Swamp and Wild Adventures. Why is it 7%? And then I started looking at the real estate market and who controlled the town, and families controlled the town. Everybody in this town is a cousin or a nephew, and nepotism was involved. The bottom line is, for this city to survive, and with the number of people that move here, that aren't from here, that don't look like us, there are a host of people who move here with the mindset to retire. There's gotta be something here for them to do, and how we fix that is we make this town lucrative for all people, and this is a hidden back door that does not seem like it matters. It wouldn't matter to a lot of people when we bring this conversation up, but the amount of money, there are two entities in which money comes through in a town in which we ignore. The school district is one. That is the largest budget in any town. Period, by far. Tourism and historic preservation is a backdoor entity in which money's being channeled back and forth that no one ever looks at, because most people think, well, I ain't got no property that needs to be historically preserved. And a lot of folk don't know that some of the properties they're living on are historic sites, but they've never gone to do any history of their property.
We did a survey of the south side.
They move in and they just live. So without this group and others that are involved, we won't know, and we, not in an adversarial manner, not in an angry manner, if we with a good godly eye take a look at the numbers, it's just like this town. If a financial analyst looked at this town, took the color off each section of town, and looked at the spending, they'd say, well, why was almost 90% of funding spent over here and the rest of the town excluded? What made this so different? And you'd have to come look. So that's why I said it's gotta be a total, it's gotta be all of us saying we actively really want to move Valdosta forward without any underlying currents that would bias us in the way we handle it.
You raised a good question. Why hasn't anyone noticed, and why is everybody silent? Someone has noticed in 43 years that no money has crossed the tracks to the south side. Someone has noticed that. Somebody with the State Historic Preservation Office has noticed it. Somebody in the city has noticed it. Somebody at Main Street has noticed it. In all these decades, someone has noticed the disparity. But why is everybody silent? I think it's because everybody is benefiting, except for the people who are outside this district. And so it behooves them to be quiet and not say anything. Some of those organizations are the city council, who rubber stamp everything that HPC recommends. They rubber stamp, don't question. The Valdosta Heritage Foundation comes up with designations for the historic preservation local historic district. No one ever questions them and asks why. Nothing is going over here across the track. No one ever asks why things aren't going to other places. I'm sure there are other areas, but this is the biggest area that was affected. But I believe Central Downtown Development Authority is a supporter of this ordinance. The Downtown Development Authority, I think they're the same thing. The Merchants Association may not be around anymore, but at one time they were. The Lowndes County Convention Visitors and Bureau, they're behind all of this ordinance stuff. They know this is wrong. In 40 years, you have to know it's wrong, Mayor. I keep looking at you because you just seem like you're so interested.
I'm not gonna get some.
Oh, I'm through. I'm really
I
through.
can get some. I'm gonna stand up.
All right.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
I need to stand up anyway.
Okay.
We all realize the facts laid out on the table,
Okay.
been presented very, very well and uniquely. But regardless of what we found, we know that none of us was there at this time when these decisions were made. I'm gonna demonstrate something here. I'm gonna take one step Okay? I can't change nothing behind that step. But what we can do is make certain that we do positive things from here forward. Mr. Mayor and Mr. Attorney, before we close out, and I know George wants to say something, but before we close out, I would like for you to explain to us where we go from here to prevent litigation and this kind of thing. And on a positive note, based upon what you heard here today and was laid out, that we presented in court on the actual facts that the communities have been excluded. It wasn't did by any of us in this room, but we do know it happened. And the only way we're gonna make progression is confront it the way it needs to be confronted. And by the way, by Mr. Hardy sitting in the seat he's sitting in is a historic moment for the city of Valdosta for 160 years. Total exclusion. For 160 years. It took this long to have a black city manager. And we'll congratulate you for the position that you're in, and we're hoping that you be elected in for the full enduring of it. And understanding the perspective of what you've been presenting here today. Look at unifying it for, as the Constitution says, we the people, not just an integrated group. So that we can bring change like Pastor Neal was saying, that she laid out here today. It's an ugly truth, but the truth of the matter is true, and we do need to make the changes. And Mr. Mayor, Mr. Attorney, and the City Manager, could you briefly let us know where we're gonna start from, how we need to work together? And I want you to know that we want somebody from the People Tribune, from the NAACP, to be on some of these boards that you're putting together. Some people don't have the insight of what's really wrong here. Some people don't have the open mind to hear the word nigger, hear the word cracker disposed and being spoken of in such a blunt and open manner. And understand how to demoralize those words to a degree. Understand when you see a man walking down the street with his pants hanging down, people that walk around that have to comb their hair, people that's looking at a degraded fashion, but yet they got a college education, but they done adapted this scenario of life that it really don't matter because they don't give a D about how things really work because they don't feel that they have an equal opportunity regardless of what the changes may be. We can change that atmosphere. If you change your environment, you indeed change the people over a given period of time. And I do believe that we can change that by working together and accomplishing our goal. But we do need some inclusion. And I'm not a man that put out threats, but I'm just a man to talk about facts. I was the lead plaintiff in a civil litigation that lasted 12 years. Manuel Noriega was in the basement doing a trial. I won the case, and I come back home to Valdosta, and I'm reminded of what I went through for those duration of those 12 years. But unfairness and injustice is something that needs to be addressed here, and I do believe that it's enough here in this city that everybody can thrive from and given an opportunity, and it would boost this whole city economy if we get some funding brought in here. I know I talked about the $250 million. I'm still talking about that. I'm still need you to try to find a way to get some funding in here so that we can get things generated. The old Dasher School could be used for a trade center. I just went back. I'm going back to school now at 69 years old. I'm just registered for a class with Wiregrass for civil engineering technology. And I start the spring semester. Now, when I get my bachelor's in a couple of years, I should be 71, 72, or 73 when I get it. But what I'm trying to say is that it's all in the wanting of making progression. And I do believe that we can succeed at this. So if you guys would, kind of elaborate on where we need to start from, how we need to start, and how we need to consider working together.
Just so you know how much I hear everything you're saying, I hear every word you're saying. Just stop telling us you're gonna sue us, please. Because every single effort I'm making south of town is every waking effort that I make every day. You heard that Griffin Avenue corridor, that's my focus. Transit, It's all I campaigned on in 19. All I said was, we've never had a transit system in this town, ever, period, end of story. And now we're moving 120,000 people a year around town, 500 a day at $2 a ride. We have a transit system, 57% of every single ride is to a job. We thought we were solving healthcare, we thought we were solving food deserts, we thought we were solving, and it turns out 57% of every single ride, 120,000 a year, is to a job. Shame on a lot of people for not having that put in place decades prior as well, but it's in place now, and it's as much as water and sewer are very needed in this city, plain and simple. So every single effort I make, that city council makes, is now focused on what our two eyes can tell us are in need. What Darren said, if somebody came in and took a look at an investment and what's new and what's blighted, it's easy to see where we gotta go fix and shore up. We're a 166-year-old city, we all know. So every single bit of my support is that CDBG effort. I would love Senator Ossoff, Senator Warnock to fund that thing ×3, because the two most passionate people that go to work in the city every single day are Anitra Riley and Richard Joyner. Those two in that program do great work for putting rooftops on houses, giving a decent quality of life. We rebuild about 3 to 4 every single year. That Habitat for Humanity is in great shape. I've attended 5 ribbon cuttings this past year alone, for houses that were totally rebuilt and revitalized. So those two efforts are key, but they're not enough. Unfortunately, a lot more are aging into substandard than we're repairing every single year, but they're making a difference. We just went to another ribbon cutting earlier this week. I'm all mixed up because I traveled to Atlanta all this week. And that's the third on that road, and that road is really starting to turn around as well. Lily Street, correct? Lily Street.
Ask you guys another question. How difficult would it be for some of these boards that you appoint, that Mr. Redwine and Mr. Darian Neal here could be on these boards, as far as amending them as a representative for our communities?
So easily, I'll give you a project that we should all take on too. Let's all take on the James Beck overpass corridor. The city council is 100%. Even before I got on, they had identified that corridor all the way to the Madison Highway for revitalization. A lot of the other programs, if you go deeper into that community, you're now into residential, and we can't do a whole lot there. I mentioned the programs that can, but on that corridor we can. So let's all focus on that corridor. James Beck overpass was built to get over those tracks and the switch yards to allow commerce to keep going. That unintended consequence was complete and total blight on that corridor. So let's work with what is restored here and start walking a block south. Let's start chasing the money through our 2 senators. There's money out there, you and I both know it. There's money raining down out of the sky, and let's work that entire corridor.
I talked with the secretary, Warnock secretary, sent her some information, but my main concern, I'm like what Gwen say, and I'm bringing it up today. I got a business over there. I had to go through SBA in Savannah to help get funding. I couldn't even get funding from the city of Valdosta through Main Street. I called Main Street and told her I might need some funding. We was all on the court until I told her the address, and she said, well, you're not represented, you can't. Where that new office came up, they were able to get funding through, it's a place in Valdosta where, downtown Valdosta, where they can get money to help beautify, get grants. I couldn't even qualify for that because I'm on the tracks. I'm over the tracks on the south side. I'm trying to do something on the south side to do like it was back when I grew up, have an eatery there, and I can't even get money from my own city because I'm in an area that doesn't qualify for the funding. And the city of Valdosta have places where you can get the grant in the funding.
Is that a facade grant?
That, and also, even if I had to get a loan, I didn't qualify because of being across the track. That's what we're talking about. That's probably why a lot of people don't build or do anything over there, because they can't even get funding like the city can.
Well, it's not probably, it's intended, so
Yeah.
Every bit of my loan's SBA as well, so you're suffering like I'm suffering, because SBA goes up 2.25 above mine.
They do.
You and I are getting
But-
killed right now.
Yeah, and like I say, still, you still need funding though.
Yeah,
And then just like all those businesses outside, they're able to, a lot of them survive because they have a place set up for them to be able to get, the money at a low interest rate and maybe get tax incentives.
So the lines could be redrawn, those are not something that is insurmountable, and let us come to you, let us work that corridor, all of us work that corridor.
Right.
And then when you say, where could you be included, there's gonna be a design phase, so everybody needs to be sitting on that design phase to talk about how it should look, how it should walk.
The Main Street program is discriminatory. It's in the ordinance. This, I have it in the packet, page 9 of the smaller package. It is it can only service those within the LHD. That's a law.
If
That's
you-
in the ordinance.
If you look at the corridor that we're taking on, that we're talking about taking on, that streetscape project of 28 years ago, when they were trying to decide whether to take a plow to the downtown or that first level streetscape, you'll see it extends past those shut down businesses and dilapidated buildings. You'll see that sidewalk and that same banner and pole segment was extended to there, and we stopped.
I wanna go back
So
and-
let's start it.
I wanna go back and address.
I'm asking the mayor to elaborate on what your intentions are, how we gonna get there, and to this degree that we're here. And then maybe elaborate a little further on how we're going to arrive to accomplish a goal that can make Valdosta a place of equilibrium for everyone in this city, because it's a city without limits, and that means it should be a city with all types of opportunities. I'm not gonna go too far into this, but we visited the banks to find out why blacks couldn't get loans, and we formed something with the 13 banks, and 9 of them met with the Chamber of Commerce. And Bill Coward at the Sommers Bank is the chairman right now, and we still got that group pulled together. And we found that it's a very difficult task for a business that don't have capital to operate. And the same is for our communities. If we don't have any money flowing through the communities economically, it means that you will not make no progression. We cannot make it without having some funding. And I believe here today that this is a very constructive beginning. We don't need to go into the courtroom and battle nothing out. I mean, especially we can resolve it and find a good way to get there. And I think that when you two guys stood there just then and done that openly, it took a lot of courage to do that. And that's what it's gonna take for us to be able to make it by. Our children walk around these stores, right downtown in the streets, and the guy walk out the store and he'll blab in his mouth and he'll say, oh, nigger this and nigger that and all that, and our kids hearing these kind of mentalities and this kind of thing. So we want that to be able to evaporate from our communities, that they don't have to downgrade themselves and call themselves names of this kind. And one of the reasons is because of economic oppression. And we get beyond that by advancing ourselves from the decisions that we make here today and how we're gonna work together. And Mr. Mayor, if you could elaborate, please, on how you see us getting there through by a form of unification that you guys just demonstrated.
You and I have been talking about a project that I think is key to a lot. I'm gonna give you one corridor that is a fantastic vision, but then I'm gonna go back to what you and I have been talking about for probably about the last 6 to 8 months. And I think that one's even more important because it's far more visible. I'll start at the Griffin Avenue corridor, a pretty forgotten corridor that we're gonna wake up tomorrow, and at the very head of that corridor where there's a simple ice machine sitting in a nice sized lot, is gonna be a 12,500 foot DG market. It's gonna be a nice supermarket at 12,500 square feet. The Georgia Department of Transportation is realigning that entranceway back out into 41 so that traffic can flow into there. There's a sidewalk on that side of the street, which is key. Even though it's a little overgrown, we're taking care of that. On that corridor has long since been an occupational clinic that South Georgia Medical Center funds, but they saw fit in their wisdom, and they fund Partnership Health to over $1 million a year. They move Partnership Health into that same building, so now that becomes access to healthcare. That's a walk-in clinic on that same corridor, on that Griffin Avenue corridor. In this past legislative session, we stuck to one single ask We got $900,000 brought back for the expansion of Southside Library, because it's less a library and more a community center and a cultural center on there, and you can see that under construction right now. Every dime went back into that so that they could pull matching funds that they had secured. That board is fantastic, and they have a great vision. Sitting right beside them is a 9-acre beautiful park. Peyton Park is a gorgeous park with pond, with bathroom, with facilities, with a ditch and connectivity to that fantastic Southside Library and their mission and their gatherings there. And then that entire old tobacco warehouse property is our favorite new project. And just this week, at the beginning of this week, we had a project management meeting. We have committed $3.4 million of our ARPA funds to a first phase 80 unit, but total on that 26 acres is going to be 280 units of affordable housing. What people now refer to as work-based housing, but it's called rate-adjusted housing, meaning if somebody's got a job and they qualify to move in there, if they're only earning $19,000 or $20,000 a year, then their rental rate comes all the way down. That is a project that'll be managed as well by IDP Properties for 15 years as part of that tax credit world they work in. So it doesn't go turning to blight or disrepair or mismanagement. It will be managed by that company for 15 years and kept in a beautiful, pristine shape. After that, they're free of the tax credits and a little bit out of our control. We're gonna purchase some of that land with some of that money, and then the rest of that money is gonna start coming back to us for future projects over about a 10-year period of time as well. But we figured that was a very responsible way to approach a very, very large need in this town, which is affordable housing as well. It's gonna be, if you wanna know, close your eyes and know what it's gonna look like, drive out Bemis Road, and there is that Freedom Heights project out there. That gorgeous apartment complex right on Bemis Road is called Freedom Heights, and it's almost gonna look exactly, if not just like that. And there is a waiting list on that is rate adjusted as well. There is a waiting list on that beautiful complex right now, and that's what we're gonna mirror right down here. And believe it or not, they got their eye on the third site down the road as well. But that is gonna be something we figured would transform that corridor. And then when you talk about that corridor, you're only 2 blocks over to Scott Park. And Scott Park 2 summers ago was our largest investment for resurfacing the track and upgrading the facilities on there as well. So it really does take a forgotten corridor that connects to some of the other areas of life in this town and lifts it up. That's a wonderful vision for that entire stretch, because there's 3 nice churches on that stretch of road as well. Again, already some established sidewalk, but the one John and I talk about, I think, is even more important, and that is the James Beck overpass corridor on both sides of that bridge. I just got some disappointing news through OSOP's office, and a lady named, how you doing? And a lady named Anna Cullen that works with them. We were chasing some federal Department of Transportation money that we thought would help with building revitalization. It's only gonna help on that corridor with either foot traffic or some of the roadways you see there. It can only help on transit or transportation or multimodal, which means we could put pedestrian walkways over the railroad track going south, meaning we could do a pedestrian walkway over 41 so that you can go down one corridor and come back up the others, and some road improvement projects. It wasn't the end-all be-all solution we were all hoping. We were hoping we could pull a couple million in design money and about 40 million in revitalization, and that's the wrong pot of money we just ran into that wall. That being said, Anna Cullen and Senator Ossoff are now fully aware, because they both now seen that corridor and that vision, that they are chasing the right pot of money. So please have that same message on that corridor. We can revitalize that with a trade school that we can bring down some of that. Again, think of an impoverished person with a union card is employable for life. So if we can bring a trade school to that corridor, if we can bring the restore down to that corridor, if we can revitalize some of those buildings and make them business incubators where somebody that doesn't have access to capital can walk right in and start paying rent and doing whatever their entrepreneurial spirit sees fit, cutting hair or otherwise, that would be good use of those buildings. And then I promise you, when you start revitalizing a corridor, you're gonna get private investment as well. You got guys like Big Nick and the rest that would love to put a brew pub and some other businesses down there in an entertainment front that they've already talked about it for years. I just went and met on Friday with the beautiful Williams family and that Koala building. They're in a position now where they got one beautifully restored side, and then unfortunately the theater side is propped up by steel poles and crumbling. A good wind would be a danger to that facility. So we're talking about how we might be able to, I can't help a 501c3, but I can help if they separated that property and surplused it to the city, or we could start chasing funds to restore that Liberty Theater and make it a public use space along that same corridor too. Yes, sir.
I do have one question out of that issue. And the city manager there. What do you think about a 0.5% sales tax increase that could be utilized to support the communities that it'll create a funding method that,
A revitalization fund?
yes.
I haven't thought about that before. And if we get there, I'll give you full credit.
Let me get back to you, Mayor, right quickly, because you mentioned, the football player in Georgia Power. Georgia Power did fund, provide a grant for Southside. We got $35,000. We earmarked that for a new roof for the building, an air conditioning system, additional air conditioning system, and the other monies that were left over was to be used for the pool. So there's no money from Georgia Power to do anything with the baseball field.
Yeah, no, I was telling him to dig up a new pot of money.
Huh?
I was telling Joe to dig up a new pot of money.
Well, yeah, but he's under this. I want a lot of misconceptions are out there because people think that there's a lot more money to go.
How can we help you with the playground equipment? Because it just disturbs me every time I see playground equipment that got rust and dilapidated. How do we help you with that? Because I mean, kids want to, us kids. When I was a kid, we play on anything. I swing from a tree. It doesn't matter if it was a tree, a bush, but to beautify, to give it a better, defense.
We'll get together and talk about that. I think.
That being said, I'd like to say this. We thank you guys for coming out and meeting with us. And need the name of the committee that's going to be over that corridor. And we'd like to have Ms. Rachel, Ms. Redwine, and Mr. Darius Neal, and perhaps Mr. Bob Elders on that committee that can help us with that corridor. And let us know how they can get on there immediately.
So that committee doesn't need to happen until we identify money. Let's go find money.
Okay.
Let's lean on Senators Warnock and Ossoff, and their office is willing to help. They now are aware of this, so let's get money, and then we'll form how to spend the money. How about that?
That'll work.
Let's go find it. Let's go find it. It's about $40 million.
You talking about Southside? Which one?
Yes, ma'am.
Martin Luther King era.
The whole area.
Okay, that's what I'm talking about.
Because we're just trying to figure out why it is 2023, we still got areas that ain't got sidewalks. And I'm like, my God,
And
I can lose my mind.
We're gonna go, George.
Yeah.
Thank you, everybody.
A special thanks to all participants at this historic meeting. On behalf of moving our beloved city forward, and to God be the glory, Mr. John H. Robinson, Ms. Gwen Sommers Redwine, Ms. Rachel Braswell, Mr. Darren Michael Neal, Ms. Valerie Ford, Ms. Tina Mache, Catherine Harris, Mr. Bob Elders. A special thanks to our elected mayor, Scott James Matheson, interim city manager Richard Hardy, and city attorney Timothy M. Tanner. Moreover, we ask that you share this video with friends, family, members, enemies, and others across the web after watching. I am George Boston Rhines of the Ghetto Free Press, and I approve this truth for you and the world in times like these. St. John 8:32, Joel 2 verse 1. G.B.R.